It's to our refrigerator
Oh,
though.
wow, okay, nice. Yeah, I did miss that. That was convenient for me, but I'm sorry for. Yes. Sure.
You.
Anyway,
Keeping.
oh, but I missed it.
What was the whole thing? What was very.
Wait, sorry, Sherry, what'd you say?
I became a great this week.
Sherry became a great grandmother.
So cute. Sherry.
What was interesting in the power failure is the Orthodox community got, I think, 3 refrigerated trailers, which they, to Yavna High School. 2 freezer and 1 refrigerator, and if you
But you don't find out about it till after you don't need it.
if you were in the community, you would.
That's amazing.
No, but yeah, but they didn't tell anybody else. I just saw it today.
I've heard some good things about how people felt.
Yeah,
They
good people, yeah. They were willing to take you food in and all kind of things.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, that's Cleveland for you, yeah. And also growing up, that was something that my rabbis always used to say, that when tragedy strikes, don't look for God in the tragedy and say, how could God do this and why, but that God is in the response, the people who bring you lasagna, God is in the lasagna. So that's very nice, always when people step up like that. God is in the pulled chicken, yes. Which brings me to thanking Elisa. When she comes out, we'll thank her again. But yeah, we'll give her a warm round of applause when she's out. So any other updates? Good and welfare? And hi, everybody on Zoom. Thanks for joining. So glad to be back.
And welcome back to you.
Hi, thank you, thank you. Yes, I was just in Germany. With the bridge. We were there for a week. Yeah, we're gonna hear about it. Well, I'll give a sermon about it, not this week, but maybe the following. But it was just a brief summary. We went with about 25 young adults from the bridge, our downtown group. And it was really powerful. One of the most powerful moments was in the concentration camp Ravensbrück, which is a women's camp. We outside of the crematoria, we all said the Shema together. And it was we did it slowly and 1 word per breath, because we wanted to make a point that here's a group of young Jews breathing outside of a crematoria and saying the Shema, being unabashedly Jewish. And it was really, we tried to make it fun too. It was hard and challenging and difficult. A lot of museums, a lot of learning, but we also wanted to have a good time, and we went to the beer gardens and did walking tours and bus tours. And Rabbi Josh actually was instrumental. He was the one who found it. So
How many people were on the? I have to give a big shout out for Robert. He was it last year.
yeah.
He did wonderful. Thanks. You two back here. All of your clergy team back.
He was everything.
How many people were on the?
Wedding in the book.
Question. So the question, what do we do? We sent out a survey at first to see for who kept strictly kosher, who would need those meals. Mostly we just did vegetarian, so we did go to restaurants and people had their pick of stuff. There were moments actually we were disappointed because I think some things were lost in translation, and there were meals where they had non-kosher options. So we had to communicate with them. But yeah.
But that was.
Well, Nancy Rosenbaum speaks Serbian.
She does.
Nancy speaks Serbian. So it was not strictly kosher. However, those who needed it could find it, and we went to, otherwise you were vegetarian. And we did go to a synagogue on Friday and Saturday for Shabbos as a conservative synagogue, and they offered meals there. Right, so Shabbos.
They knew you were coming.
Yes, we have arranged it. Yeah.
How many people?
25.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a nice big group.
I missed that.
Yes, exactly. They're only two and two. So we started doing something before and we never really have followed through with it, but I want to bring it back, which is where we dedicate our learning to somebody. So if anybody has anybody they'd like to dedicate our learning today to, I want to do a quick go around. If anybody wants to dedicate it in the name of honor, memory, Anyone?
In memory of my father-in-law who was a Holocaust survivor and he was a child in the Holocaust. So, and this weekend is his yours.
Zichrono Livracha, what was his name?
Zalman
Salman.
Potlipsky.
Anybody else before we begin?
Yeah, as a matter of fact. Brian, my dad's 52nd grandson.
Wow. And what was his name?
I am Yitzhak Ben Meir.
I'm Yitzhak. Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be blessed.
I totally forgot.
There you go, good that we're remembering. Well, some of you may have heard, some of you may have not, but recently we just lost Rabbi Milton Root. His wife had
This
passed
morning,
away,
last night.
and he passed away very recently. I think,
He was just 99.
so I actually do wanna, I know it seems like, hey Lenny, how are you? Good to see you. If you want, there's food, if you wanna grab a plate, no pressure. And I know it feels like I'm stalling. I do have a lesson planned for today, but if anybody has any memories of Rabbi Root, I met him once in passing, but obviously I came after him. I didn't get to know him, but if anybody has any memories they want to share.
He's supposed to
We
officiate.
belonged to Beth Angus and we joined there when our kids were very little. And he ended up bar mitzvah with the kids at weddings. And just we have a lot to go back a long time with him. It's very,
I go back longer.
yeah.
I was supposed
Great,
to
a
do my
great man.
Wow.
and then he decided to go on vacation.
He used to belong to Beth Angus.
Your memories.
Yeah.
That part.
Say again?
I only thought it was about mitzvah at Beth Angus.
Oh, wow, okay,
So we did too.
yeah.
I was about, not when I was a kid, when I was 35 years old, I was the second person who had an adult bat mitzvah there. Wasn't a whole class, it was just
Wow.
a little bit later than that too, yeah.
Oh, wow. And was he part of that? Was he?
No,
No.
Kathy Sebo was,
Okay, yeah.
she was the one who worked for me.
Got it.
He was here to say Kaddish for his wife.
Yes,
So he
that's
was
right.
coming
That's
here.
where I met him. Yes, Bob. And then Elliot.
So I went to Ohio State and one of my roommates in the dorm was from Henderson, Kentucky, which is across the river from Evansville, Indiana. His
He
bar
was in
mitzvah
that-
rabbi was rabbi.
Well, small world.
Elliot, yes.
I remember Rabbi
Good,
Rude
welcome back.
when this shul was on Mayfield, called Temple on the Heights, that I could say, speak about him, see him up there on the bima next to Rabbi Rosenthal. And both were very loved and admired.
He's supposed to come here, there was some, I didn't quite get the politics there.
So I want to do our traditional go around question leading into our topic today, and then I'm going to get our source sheet up on Zoom as well. But there sort of can be a dichotomy in terms of how you find meaning in Jewish spaces. One is you say, I am a davener, I am a prayer Jew, and the other is I'm a learner, I'm a study Jew. And I think Ron, we joke about
already
this
know
because I think Ron is a prime example of a Torah Jew, a study Jew, right? He finds meaning in study and not in the prayer experience. But I want to go around and ask you, would you consider, and by the way, this could be a false dichotomy and that's sort of spilling where we're going to head with this teaching, but would you consider yourself more of a Torah Jew or a davening, a prayer Jew? And why?
You left out.
Or community, sure, this is not an exhaustive list, right? There are other ways to connect.
Well, it's only the 3 level school.
Yes, right. But I'm particularly interested today in davening, prayer versus Torah or study. Yeah, please.
I grew up in a secular home, but my mother kept the customs and tradition. When I came here and I had children, we used to go to an Orthodox shul. My husband's family only I went only on high holidays. When they did not let Reggie sit with Dave. I said, I'm not going to this shul anymore. We joined the Ehrenbergs at Beit Am.
Mhm.
Like the bat mitzvah that their oldest daughter had. We joined and we stayed.
Mm.
I stayed until the middle of the field. And I started coming to the minyan to help out. So I don't know if I'm a davening or a studying. I'm helping.
Oh, I love that.
And I learned, don't laugh, but I learned the services at junior congregation at Beit Am. I used to go with the kids. I discovered words that my mother used to use in her spoken language, daily language. I said, oh, that's what she said.
Because that you found them in the Siddur?
Yes.
Amazing.
Somebody said slicha, and she said, "Salachti kidvarecha."
So it was so part of her lexicon, it just soaked in.
She spoke Leziki.
I love it. So the Siddur sort of helped you connect to your mom. Let's keep that in mind because one of the texts that we're going to be exploring is the Avot blessing. Although in conservative circles, we do, or liberal, big C in our conservative movement, which includes the liberal movements, Reform, Conservative, we add the Imahot, so our ancestors' prayer, but how prayer helps you connect with your ancestors. So that's a prime example, and we're going to get into that. Anybody else? Yes.
More study than prayer, but even more cultural. Like we come most Saturdays for services. And of course, I know the service because we've been coming for so long, but really I come for community.
So interesting. So far, both answers have sort of been rejecting this dichotomy and giving a third. Either it's community or it's helping, right? That's good too. Yeah, Dave.
So I was gonna go with both also. I'm
Okay.
musical, so I like finding God in the music that goes with the words. And sometimes the music that doesn't have words. And I like studying and I like studying with all of you because I like finding God in the insights you bring that I didn't think of that make me think of something else.
I love it. So just wherever you can find God. I love that. Yes.
I started out, my father went to a shtibel. It was a more liberal, it was a nice shtibel. It wasn't, the rabbi shaved and all, what can I say?
Yeah.
But they just started a Hebrew school. They started a Sunday school. And my father, this was, going back a long time. And I started out in Hebrew school. And I wouldn't go to shul. I wouldn't be caught. I mean, this was all men.
Yeah.
We didn't have any I was in the Bronx and we did have a big synagogue. And Friday nights occasionally I would go with my father. We would go he liked to hear the chazan. That was after he went to Dominion. But so I never really went to shul. And then I went to Camp Ramah. And that's where I started really davening.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have that story where camp really opens up a world of possibility because it's
Well, you-
experiential.
You understand the prayer. I mean, when
Yeah.
I went to Hebrew high school, we studied the prayers and not the way we teach the kids now. I mean, we learned what every word meant, what was the idea. It was pretty thorough.
I have a colleague named Freddie, and he's a rabbi as well, and he talks about Shlomo Carlebach, who's controversial with his personal biography, but his contributions, can't really be denied what he did to reinvigorate prayer through his music. But Freddie tells a story about Shlomo Carlebach at this prayer retreat with rabbis. Maybe it was the rabbinical assembly or whatever it was. And at one point he interrupts and he goes, "I've had it." And everybody goes, "What?" And he goes, "This has been days after days, hours after hour of talking about prayer. Nobody's actually praying." And then he took out his guitar and and it was that sort of okay, we could talk about it, but you have to really experience it. That's how you connect to it.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I go to school is, and I can't deny, she calls me a foodie. I enjoy a good kiddush. However, far more important would be the rabbi's sermon. I like to leave with a take-home piece and something that moved me to connection with Hashem and Rabbi Jacobs. I think you are excellent in doing that. I taught public speaking for many years and I've analyzed what you do. You have a beautiful way of blending your personal story with humor, with the seriousness of Torah, all three. It's marvelous, marvelous.
Thank you.
May God empower you to be with us and your wonderful
Amen,
Rabbi
amen.
wife for many decades to come. End of talk.
But I will say that, so here's an interesting connection. So you were talking about being a foodie and liking a good kiddush, but also a good sermon or a good study. My teachers, for whom I owe any, ability in this department, but I have one who presented to me his theory that Torah text study sermons, what you're doing is you're offering somebody a meal. And you need to find the right ingredients. And they should be exotic. It shouldn't be the same old stuff that, even though it's all great, but if you have it too much, you want something to, and you shouldn't overload your plate, right? Don't just don't make it a stew, right? Rabbi Feinstein, who's the best, right? He's the best orator. He's incredible, one of the best. He said when he was a young rabbi, he used to give a stew where he would just throw so much in because he was trying to impress. And at the end of the day, it was not nearly as effective as when he had more confidence and gave much less and then dove deeply into those ingredients. So just do a few ingredients that pair nicely together. Anyway, so there is sort of an interesting connection between being a foodie and liking a good studier. So anyway, let's dive in.
Quickie.
Yeah. Go ahead.
He mentioned the sermon, and I consider the sermon part of the learning.
Yes,
So-
right,
So he didn't say
It's
prayer
Torah.
either, it's the learning.
right. It's study. It's Torah. Good.
Study.
Okay, so I want us to talk today about prayer versus Torah study and how prayer could actually be a form of Torah study. And for one particular commentator, Abu Draham, from the 14th century, they were kind of one and the same. And particularly if you look at the Amidah, and we're only going to focus on the Avot blessing, the first one that invokes our ancestors, that it's actually a series of biblical references and verses, almost like if you're hyperlinking. If you click on this, it takes you to, here's where it comes from, right? And it actually may transform your prayer experience. That is my goal for today, that this might transform your prayer experience because it did mine once I learned about this. But first we have to step back and say, let's just talk about prayer in general. What inspires prayer? How often you're supposed to pray, and where does a prayer instinct come from? So if you look at, there's disagreement in our commentators. So one Rambam, right, Maimonides, he said that you should pray once a day. Right, we know that the rabbis have fixed it to be 3 times a day, right? Shacharit, Mincha, and Mariv, and they get this from 2 different explanations. One is that those were the offerings at the temple, so now the temple's destroyed. We honor those 3 temple sacrifices by praying instead. The other is
They do daily though.
right, but Mincha and Mariv being one altogether, right? So then the other is the patriarchs, because it says that Abraham woke up early to do the binding of Isaac, so that's Shacharit because he went up early. That Isaac went out and lingered in the field, well, that must have been prayer. Right, so they get Mincha, Mariv, and Shacharit from the patriarchs or from the temple sacrifices. But Rambam says that, okay, the rabbis may have fixed those set times for prayer, but he actually says that really it's just once a day, which kind of makes sense with his busy doctor schedule, right? He once wrote a letter to I think a family member saying, don't even visit me, I don't have time. My whole day is, right? So it kind of makes sense that maybe he, wouldn't have been able to pray 3 times a day. Ramban, Nachmanides says, you know what? Both are wrong. This daily prayer thing, it's keva, right? It's fixed prayers, but it might not be kavanah. You're only supposed to pray when you really feel held, like calling out to God, Mina Meitzar, like from dire straits, from the narrow place. Okay, so those are some of the different ways to go. Go ahead. Yeah.
When you say that Isaac didn't pray, he went to, that's not true. Because when you go to the nature, it's in awe of everything that you are seeing. So it's a prayer by itself. That our Shem created the.
Yeah, I think we're actually saying the same thing, and certainly you're saying what the rabbi said, that must have been prayer. But I understand you're saying it didn't need to be a set
Yeah, you know.
liturgical experience, because just moving around in nature, having
And the
that,
same
yeah,
things all the time, repeated, you
Right,
know? Because
exactly.
it gets boring, then your mind
Yes.
wanders, and then you are losing.
And that's why you have this debate amongst the commentators, because I think they're worried about that very thing. That if we fix it 3 times a day, if it's not coming from that place of genuine, God, I need to talk to you now because I need to talk to you, then prayer might lose its meaning or be empty prayer. And how many times do the prophets say, you know, God doesn't want this, right? God wants true, genuine behavior and kind of.
Now, that's interesting because the Muslims pray what,
Five
5 times a day.
yeah, even
Yeah,
more.
in the middle of everything, midrash, and they go bend down and on their knees on the rugs.
Times.
And the Christians,
Yeah.
Yoga mats.
they do it, they have a lot of services usually.
Yeah,
Because they don't care. I mean, their clergy that's all, you know, that's their main function. But also they also want you to just come into the church and you can pray to Jesus. You don't need, you know, you can have your requests, which we don't have.
right. Yeah, so it's interesting to look at how the different religions take
Yeah,
this.
we don't
differently.
have that. You have to come when there is a service.
Right, exactly.
Because you need to have a minion.
Yes, and the whole thing about, right, because there are certain prayers you can't do, Divine Biktu Shah, right? The prayers that need a minyan require a minyan, but also this like spontaneous prayer being something that in many ways is foreign to Jews. In my chaplaincy experience, that was something that you needed to do. You needed to have spontaneous prayer with patients.
Yeah.
And in this regard, I have to say that my Christian colleagues blew me out of the water with the way that they did that, because for me, I'm happy to do a Misha Bera, but I'm
the
glued
other
to the
hand-
book. It's not necessarily our comfort zone, but I think that's sad. And I have to say personally,
Let me relieve your sadness for a moment then,
Okay.
because I think the other side of that coin is we often use Hannah as the prime example of how to pray.
Right.
And if that wasn't spontaneous, I don't know what was.
Right.
And she's not the only one.
Yeah.
She's just maybe the most famous one. I don't think there's anything against spontaneous prayer for which you don't need a minyan.
Right.
The only idea is, though, that when we're doing communal prayer, it should be with a minyan, and there is this tension, I think, between the fixed prayer and whatever else you might do. And at least in our movement, the way we try to satisfy that is, you know, if you finish the Amida and you want to do something else, do it.
Right.
You didn't finish the Amida or didn't do it at all.
Right.
So you'll hear it in the repetition, but do whatever you're doing while we're all davening or praying silently.
It shouldn't be either or, and exactly right, that actually the rabbis derive our Amidah prayer, all these halachot from the way that Hannah prayed, and Hannah prayed belibo, right? She prayed with
Yeah.
her heart.
But if you're in the hospital and the rabbi comes in, the chaplain comes in, then they do spontaneous prayer.
Samuel's mother.
Let me just take a step back. So Hannah is the mother of Samuel the prophet.
Yeah.
And she desperately wants a child, but she's barren, as is the, you know, motif of many of our matriarchs. And she goes to Eli, who's the priest of Shiloh. She goes to the altar and she davens, she prays with her heart. It says that her lips moved, but no sound was heard. And so Eli, the priest, thought she was drunk.
Yeah.
And actually rebukes her and says, put away your drunkenness from, right? Basically, you're desecrating the holy site. And she says, no, you know, I am just praying from my heart. I'm a woman who's deeply in pain and in longing, and I'm calling out to God. And Ellie realizes, oh my God, I didn't even recognize true prayer when it smacked me in the face. But that goes to say that like we are used to our set cultic, you know, rituals, and that Ellie, who's the priest, didn't even recognize spontaneous prayer. Go ahead, and then I do want to get in because there's a lot to go.
When you light the Yortzeit light,
Sorry?
you light the Yortzeit light, or you go to the grave, your loved one.
Yeah.
You pray, you do it non-communally,
Mhm.
you do it yourself.
And there's individual prayer as well, right? So not everything requires a minyan. Exactly right.
But also in churches, because I have a lot of Catholic friends too,
They have regular services and they pray the way they pray. It's not all spontaneous prayer.
Right.
It's
No, for
the
sure.
priest
Yeah.
who is leading the service.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of ritual and dogma in.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah, there's, not to say that it's not set too. And by the way, I just want to say, Rabbi told me that we have a special guest tuning in today. Last name Aronovich. No pressure to introduce yourself, but we're glad you're here. I know that you learn with Rabbi, you're a young man, and just glad you're here. And if at any point you want to introduce yourself, we'd love to meet you. And of course, to all of our regulars on Zoom as well. It's always wonderful to see you. But Abudraham points out that there is no fixed prayer in Torah, right? This is something that the rabbis derive, but they do it midrashically, right? But then prayer is individualistic in Torah. It's when you call out to God in times of distress or when you need that connection. And the rabbis make it collectivist in Galut. Once the temple's destroyed and we're in exile, the rabbis go from something that was individualistic to communal, which is actually a break in the typical rabbinic move, which is to do the opposite post-destruction of the temple, which is to take something that was collectivist and make it individualistic. With prayer, it's the opposite, right? Now something that in the Torah and the Torah was individualistic, the rabbis make it communal. So I want us to take a look at how Abudraham treats prayer as a form of Torah study in a way to enhance your prayer by telling us where everything comes from. And he sometimes does it midrashically, where there may be a verse that comes from multiple places in Torah, and he picks one over the other because he thinks that is the experience that should be motivating your prayer. So what do I mean by this? Abudraham is saying, I want you to actually literally, like a hyperlink, click on the moment in Torah where this verse comes from so that you could tap into the emotion that is evident in that context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It comes to, sorry.
Say it לפני העמידה.
Yes, exactly right. So let's dive into our first verse and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is what we say right before we do the Amidah. Adonai sefatai chivtach ufi yagid shilatecha. Oh God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. But does anybody know where it actually comes from? That's our next text. So does somebody want to read Psalm 51? Go for it, Karen, thanks.
Leader, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came to him after he had come to Bathsheba. Have mercy upon me, O God, as befits your faithfulness, in keeping with your abundant compassion. Blot out my transgressions, for I recognize my transgressions and am ever conscious of my sin. Save me from blood guilt, O God, God my deliverer, that I may sing forth your beneficence. O Lord, open my lips and let my mouth declare your praise.
So what's the context here? What has David just done that's inspiring this psalm? We get it from the first, it actually tells us.
Yeah, so he's just, he gets Bathsheba by taking Bathsheba's husband, putting him in the front line and telling everybody else step back so he could get killed.
Right. Yeah, the Hittite, right? So David falls in lust or in love with Bathsheba, who was bathing on the roof, right? And first, because he impregnates her, what he tries to do is get Uriah to come back home from service to be with his wife, to sort of cover up the fact that the child is King David's, right? Our heroes are flawed, and this is one of the most, if not the most glaring examples, right? But Uriah, who is a righteous man, says, I can't abandon my men. And he sleeps instead of sleeping at home with his wife, as he was invited to do by the king, he sleeps on the floor of the barracks with his men, right? The Torah doesn't try to cover up what David did. I mean, it makes you really emotional and angry at David for doing this, right? So the next thing David does, because he can't cover it up, is he sends Uriah to the front lines where he's sure to be killed, and he is. So David is calling out to God, Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi yagid tilatecha, from a place of utter despair and disgrace and shame and guilt and saying, oh God, I am speechless when faced with my own shortcomings. What can I say to you after I've done what I've done? Imagine accessing that emotion before saying your Amidah. Whatever it is for you personally that elicits the greatest shame or guilt or, oh my God, I'm speechless. Open my mouth that I may declare your praise. Imagine starting your Amidah from that place. That's sort of what Abu Draham is doing, but he actually rejects this source, even though it is so obviously the source from which it comes. And he says, I actually don't pray from that quote. He goes from this source, which is from Mishle, from Proverbs. Does somebody want to read 16:1?
A person may arrange their thoughts, but what they say depends on the Lord.
Great, so now this is not a literal origin or proof text for Adonai Sfatai Tifach V'Yagid Tihlatacha, but it is conceptually, right? A person may arrange their thoughts, but what they say depends on God, on the Lord. So Abu Draham is saying, when you pray, when you say this verse, Hashem Sfatai Tifach, don't think the David Psalm from which it comes. Think rather from Proverbs that says a person may arrange their thoughts, but what they say depends on God, which is really more a statement, more philosophic or more linguistic about the way language works, right? To say that we order our thoughts, but ultimately God determines what's actually spoken.
Coming out of our mouth.
Yes, go ahead.
So here's from my learning and not my praying.
Mhm.
If, I take that Proverbs one as saying, okay, God's gonna tell us what to say, so why bother saying it?
Well, so here's what's interesting, right? So if you look at how Maimonides views Moses and what made him our greatest leader and prophet, it's not just that God chose a random person who didn't do any like preparation to reach that state of excellence. He says that Moses had prepared himself so much, so spiritually, that he tuned into a frequency that actually we're all potentially able to hear, sort of like radio waves and antenna. That God is sending out those radio waves all the time, but Moses had done such spiritual preparation that his antenna was able to tap into this frequency. So I think in a way, what Abu Draham is saying with going with Proverbs here is that you still have to do the inner work. Like you still have to do the spiritual preparation and try to prepare yourself for prayer. And what do I want to say and order your thoughts? That ordering your thoughts is active. It's not just God, I don't know, you do it, right? I'm here, but you do the rest, right? No, like you actually have to do the work and say, what am I trying to get out of this experience? What do I want to say to God? Let me order my thoughts. What do I need right now? Or what do I need to give right now? Or, you know, what is it that where am I, right? Ayeka, I think you need to do that work. And then if you've done it, God can then
Well, let me go one more step then.
Yeah.
If what you say depends on the Lord, which is what that says there, and you go along with what you just said there, then you can't have rote prayer. You can't say the same prayer every
right,
day. It's
right.
gotta be something different.
Right, because God is gonna determine what comes out.
And
that's
that's
gonna
why
be different.
I say spontaneous prayer is
Right.
more important.
Yeah.
The rote prayer at the designated times
Yeah.
is irrelevant, immaterial.
Yeah, but the rote prayer has the function, there are people who don't know
You
what to
understand,
say.
you
Right.
understand it differently every day.
Right,
It's
Different
supposed-
place, I understand that.
yeah,
It inspires you enough times,
yeah.
so then you can adapt it to your needs.
Right, it's for those who don't know how to pray, but also it's sort of guardrails, right? That like if you're on a hike,
Yeah, don't go too far off the.
yeah, so that no
Yeah.
matter what, at the end of the day, if you say these words, our rabbis will feel that you will have had a meaningful prayer experience, but you don't have to be beholden to them, right? Go on your hike, go on your journey, but here are the rails so that you don't fall off the edge. Yes.
Question about prayer and about how it relates to you. When Yom Kippur, you say the Al Chait. And basically, you're asking to be forgiven for many things that you never did,
Mhm.
because you're trying to represent the community and
Yeah.
not you.
Right.
But you're praying as if it's from you.
Yes. Yeah,
Thank you.
And what's interesting to you about that? The fact
Well,
that
the
you,
fact that you're saying for what I did, but I didn't do this.
Right. but we are a unit in a way. And so your sins are my business.
Yeah.
Because we're all sort of in it
So
together.
it's kind of a you as a plural, not a you as a singular.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Go ahead, ask that, and then I'll get to the
I
second.
was gonna say, Cantor Rosenbaum did a class on that prayer that we say, on Yom Kippur, and we talked about how, that prayer can also be turned into like a prayer of thanksgiving. Cause like we can, for the things that we didn't do that we're praying for, we can be thanking God that we didn't
Nice,
do
too.
that.
That's nice too. That's good.
So,
Yes, David and then Bob. I like that.
So I think that picking up on what Sheila said about the fixed prayer, I think that there are a lot of potential benefits, at least from my point of view. One of them is that sometimes you have the feeling or you have a need or you wish to express whatever you wish to express and can't find the words. So you have these words and you have the melodies that go with them. I think sometimes I feel like a real connection in that. Sometimes I'm soaring. I feel like I've connected across the world and through time the
Yeah.
way in theory we should feel,
Mhm.
but don't always feel. And other times I feel like, you know, the old joke about how did the guy wake up and remember he was doing the Amida while he was thinking about which bus he has to catch. I think it's probably a range for all of us. I don't think I'm probably alone, and sometimes it just, I just didn't get it today.
Yeah.
And other times it's, wow, if I could get it like this every time, wouldn't that be great?
Right.
So sometimes the words aren't there or the feeling is there, but the attainment isn't, and you still need to be together with everyone to give it a try.
Right. Good, absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
So I like to pray in Hebrew, but I'm not as fast as the service is. So like when we do Aleinu, there's the first part that we sing, then there is a whole page that we don't sing or read out loud, and then we do the last two lines. Well, my challenge is to finish in time to get there.
Right.
So that's my self-improvement project that I'm working on, which is repeated multiple times during Shabbos service.
Yeah.
So even though it's the same prayers, for me, it's not the same from week to week.
Oh, wow.
So
I like
I
that.
am at the point now that I can almost get through the Amida before they start the repetition.
That's great. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but the
but at the beginning of the service, I'm way behind and I have a lot of, I could practice at home to get there. That's not my point.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pray more when I'm praying rather than practice them at home to get faster so that I can be caught up.
I love that. I'm gonna say one thing and then Ron has a response too, but so there's a place I like to daven in LA, but they don't do all of the matbea. They don't do all the prayers. And so, but I'm somebody who likes to do all the, I feel like I'm depriving God of more praise if I don't say this, so I feel I need to say that. But that means I'm behind, right? Because they're moving quick, they're cutting and going. I'm glued to the page trying to make up for what's lost. And Rabbi Alex, who is much more about kavanah, she still values all the prayers and all the words, but she's more about the communal davening experience. She says to me, "You're missing everything." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Did you know that there's a woman in the third row who's crying?" I said, "No." He said, "Did you see the little kid on her dad's lap, bouncing up and down and smiling and laughing?" I said, "No." And she said, if you haven't looked into the eyes of the person sitting across from you, you haven't prayed a day in your life.
Whoa.
And it always said, actually, I sort of hardened it. She wasn't so harsh, but I thought it was, so so all this to say, Bob, that there's so many different ways to pray. And I love that you're trying to get with the kahal at the same pace. And I encourage you to keep, But also there comes, there's a cost if it's always playing catch up and not actually being open to other, finding God in other moments.
Okay, well, I mean, you're bringing up another reason why I don't like rote prayer.
I don't go to
I
morning.
mean, you're trying to rush through it and finish it. You're not using it, no kavanah involved, no understanding what you're saying. So to me, it's worthless to do that.
No, but you get the covenant, you have to, if you study the prayer. Now, I mean,
Yeah, but
I mean, let's
if
face
he's
it,
trying
I
to
studied-
speed read it,
we studied it. It was
I've studied the
of
prayers
course.
too. You think I remember what they?
Yeah, but if you don't
Yeah.
do it, then you are just saying the words and.
Right.
But, I mean, I have to say, and maybe I shouldn't confess this when it's on Zoom.
It's not that it's being recorded.
I don't like to go to Morning Minion because they go so fast. I can't, I mean, you can't keep up. I'm able to pick out words that they're saying so that I know they're on the next page.
And yes,
People
Yeah.
can't.
and I think that's a real problem. And also to be a devil's advocate, I'd say that to push back on Ron, that I think that, yeah. It may just seem like, oh, if you're just speeding through, or you're trying to just hang every word, that there's no kavanah there. But I would say the God I believe in
Understands.
might take joy and delight in the fact that you're trying your hardest to say and that in itself is a form of kavanah. Like, here I am, I'm trying to master this language and just.
Can read it in English if I want.
Yeah, right. You're engaging in Lashon HaKodesh and the holy tongue. So,
Fast enough.
yeah. So you're,
And no Hebrew.
yeah, right. It's hard. It's hard. Yes, go ahead, David.
So bringing this back to the rabbis, don't they say in Masechet Brachot that you shouldn't go too fast? You need to have the right pace to maintain the kavanah.
Yeah.
And don't they point out, I can't remember the exact rabbi's name, I'm sure you'll tell me who it is. A certain rabbi has enough time in his day somehow to daven shachrit until it's time for mincha, daven mincha until it's time for mariv. Presumably sometime he has a little time to eat and sleep, and then it's time for shachrit.
Which does Marav until it's time to say the Shema.
Yeah, now I don't
And when he
think
gets
they're
up, he says
actually
it
saying
again.
that that's what we should all be doing.
Right.
And we know they all had day jobs, or mostly had day jobs.
Yeah.
I guess the challenge for us, and maybe it was a challenge for them, I don't know, is how do you pace things in a way that keeps people coming to the room, but also, for example, on weekday morning, Minyan, gets you to work on time.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly right.
and I have to ask this, you don't have to answer it, but I've had this experience many, many times, and I'm a relatively fast reader. I'm trying to get the Amida finished before the repetition starts. I finish most of the time before the repetition starts, and I look up at the bima and the clergy are having a conversation, like they finished the Amida
10 minutes.
30 seconds after I started it.
Mhm.
So I don't know how that works, and you don't have to reveal the man who's in the group. You don't want to, but it just feels like, is that humanly possible?
The conversation we're having is David Schifrin staring daggers at me? I think. But on the topic of pacing, I do want to, is it okay? I want to keep going because there's so much, I promised you transformative prayer experience and I haven't given you enough to transfer your prayer. Can we come back to it in the end? I'm sorry, I just want to keep going. Okay, I do apologize. I really do. I just want to make sure. Okay, so let's go on to another verse in the Amidah, right? We've only gotten to open my mouth, right? And we haven't gotten to the actual vote blessing. So here we go. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu right? So blessed are you, God, our God, and God of our ancestors, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. So now we're in our avot, our patriarchs, our ancestors blessing, the first of the Amidah. There's a couple things really interesting about this opening line of what the rabbis considered Tefillah, the most important prayer, right? The Shema is a creed, but this is what they would, when they would pray, it was the Amidah. The first line is not like any other line for a couple of reasons, and we need to look at the Bavli to understand why. This is from Tractate Brachot. Who wants to read? This is what like the instructions for if you're making prayer, this is what a prayer needs in order for it to be prayer.
I'll do it.
Go for it, Francis, thanks.
Rav said, any blessing that does not contain mention of God's name is not considered a blessing. And Rabbi Yonahan said, any blessing that does not contain mention of God's sovereignty is not considered a blessing.
So you need two ingredients for it to be a proper prayer. One is Shem, God's name, and the other is Malchut, acknowledging God's kingship or
Well,
sovereignty.
that we know that it's our God and not just any God, is
Yeah.
basically what he's saying.
And I think it's also it's like also respect, right? It's kavod. You're not just saying, hey, God, give me this, I need this. You're saying, God, master of the unit, right? You're coming with, there's humility, there's relationship, there's acknowledgement of God, there's praise, right? Then you can, ask for something or say something. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, Rav here and Rabbi Yochanan, are they disagreeing with each other or are they agreeing and you have to have both?
It's a good question. In the
Because
context. of-
normally in the
yeah.
Talmud, they're disagreeing with each other.
Right. It is in the style of a machloket here, but I think what's taken from this, what the rabbis do with it is that you need both. So they're saying it's both are right. You need, or maybe it's a compromised position.
And yet there
You need-
seem to
Oh,
be
that's why,
acceptance anyway.
that's why the tzitzi,
The mezuzah is slanted.
planted, yes.
So now here, so if you look at the prayer, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Velokei Avotenu, boom, there's a departure from the rule, right? We have Shem, but what do we not have?
Sovereignty.
Sovereignty, Malchut. But we have God's name, but we don't have Malchut. We don't have God's sovereignty. That is, there's shock value there. And if you're a close reader, that strikes you as, what's going on here? Right? So there are three explanations that Abu Draham gives to why this is. One, he says it's there, but it's just deferred. So later on, when we get to El Elyon, that's Malchut. That's one explanation. The other is Abu Draham is saying that, Abu Draham says that Abraham is the Malchut because he was the first to himlich, to declare God's sovereignty. So instead of saying God is sovereign or king, instead of doing that by invoking Abraham, that is the Malchut ingredient. Abraham is because Abraham was the first to declare God as sovereign, as king. But actually, he kind of rejects both of those and says, you know what? It's just not there. And that's intentional. It's not there, and that's to indicate that this prayer that we're about to say is different. It's intimate, and it's using familial language. So it's an intentional departure, and instead of invoking Malchut, it's invoking this tribe, our ancestors, our common ancestry. And that the emphasis is purposely placed on that, which we'll unpack in a bit. Nelson, yes.
I'm sorry, I have a smart plug in the house and I invoke it by saying, hey, Google. But it sounds like I can't say, hey, God.
Okay, I see what you're saying. If you can say, hey, Google, and Google listens, why can't you say, hey, God, and God listens?
Yes.
Isn't God as powerful and knowledgeable as Google? So that's a good, I agree with you, yes. And frankly, I like the idea that God is a friend, right? And there are certain of our heroes that merit that kind of title, right? That God walked with Abraham and spoke to Moses face to face like a friend, right? But I think as an average person, I hesitate to have that.
He walked behind Abraham.
Oh, good, yeah. Right, that, because one needs it, the other doesn't need the support. That's a Rashi. But that I don't want to be so presumptuous with my relationship with God to say, hey, God, right? I want to be more formal because it's respectful, but I also love that a relationship with God should be so intimate that you don't need those like formalities. You should be able to, like Tevye talking to God, right? Like, as it says in the good book, oh, I need to tell you what it says in the good, like that kind of conversational relationship is wonderful. So I agree with you. It should have that.
When you say go out to nature, there are a lot of people who say, I think they just don't want to pay synagogue dues. But what they do, on young Rosh Hashanah,
Yeah, that's
they're,
right.
they're communing with nature and they go to some
Yes,
place.
Yeah.
And they say their prayers,
Right.
whatever they do, they probably
Yeah.
say some poem to nature, but they're recognizing, that, first of all, they're not working.
right. There you go. And they're carving out time for,
Hey, that nature is part
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I want
Uh,
to,
I agree.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to say that this brings another perspective to me. This is like what I was talking about at the beginning. You're all bringing a perspective that I didn't have to that, so maybe my future davening of a vote will be a little different, but to me, it always felt like, maybe this is the implication of this next source, but we're invoking our ancestors who had merit and a close relationship with God as we're starting our
Right.
prayer. So to me, it always felt functional in that sense.
Yes,
Because it's not that God doesn't already know that.
Right.
And has been frankly constantly reminded by us over the centuries.
Right.
But we need to remind ourselves sometimes.
nice. Good. I think that's wonderful, right? So on one hand, it's functional in the sense of like, God, while I may be a nobody, humility here, right? I may be a nobody, but look where I come from. I come from these people that you plucked from, obscurity because, and so because of that, please listen to me. But you're saying it's not to remind God of that, it's to remind ourselves of our tribe, of our commitment to this project that is greater than any one individual and that ties us together as a community, right? That we're family. We literally share the same mother and father.
Somebody once said to me, you can't prove the existence of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And, so why do you think they're real? And I said, as an observant Jew, and in the way we observe Judaism here in the conservative movement, no offense to my great grandparents, but I don't even know their names or
Yeah.
where they were from. What I do know is I'm standing on their shoulders because I'm still here, still doing this.
Right.
But, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah are people we know.
Right.
We read about them every year.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I do want to
How
keep going
more-
because I'm
how more
conscious
real
of
could they
the
be?
time. Right. Let's keep going. So where does this come from? Right? Who wants to read Exodus? Abraham saying, I know exactly where this comes from, and you may know yourself. But who wants to read? Go for it. Thanks.
And God said, do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. And continued, I am the God of your father's house, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
So this is something that has transformed my Amidah. If I, right, at first, okay, Hashem Svatai Piftach, you could go to David, you could go to that place of guilt and shame and speechlessness. You could go to, here's how language works. I'm gonna order my words and what comes out is determined by God. But when you begin the Avot prayer, you're standing in front of the burning bush. And you're being called back into God and into family from a place of disconnection. Because if you look, where is Moses when God calls out from the burning bush? He fled Egypt, right? He's away from his fellow Israelites. He's off in Midian. He's literally a stranger in a strange land. And it's in that moment that God finds him and calls him back into connection and into his identity, his ancestral identity, right? So if you approach prayer from a place of disconnection, I'm feeling disconnected today. I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling grief. I'm feeling like I'm floating around. I don't know who I am or what I need in this moment. What if you start your prayer from, that moment is when God calls you into connection. It's not that you're lost and how could I ever get, that's when God chooses to appear to Moses. So you never know, where you might actually find that deep connection. It may be feeling like a stranger in a strange land. That's exactly where you're called back in. It's like we start by taking 3 steps backwards in order to take take 3 steps forwards. So family, God calls you back into connection. You are inextricably linked to this nation, right? That is what God is saying to Moses. You think you could hide, you think you can get away, right? It even says, and Moses hid his face, right? And we know Jonah tries to hide from God. God is saying, no, I'll find you. Wherever you are, not just me, but your ancestry will find you. You are inextricably linked to this people and to this shared destiny. The tug of family calling you back into the fold. Remember, what was Moses looking for when he finds the burning bush?
Lost sheep.
A lost sheep. What if Moses is that lost sheep, right? Moses has literally been separated from the fold, right? He's run away. He's hiding. What if the sheep is actually a metaphor for Moses? And Moses is being called back into the fold, just like Moses is trying to get the sheep literally back in the fold. God is getting Moses back into the fold, saying, go back to Egypt. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. What if my people is the most important part of that? Remember that this is your people. So the Avot prayer, why doesn't it evoke God's kingship? Why instead does it evoke our ancestors? And why does it do so starkly, violating the rules of prayer, the 2 ingredients? Maybe it is to drag us from our disconnection by reminding us of our ancestry, our shared heritage, and our tribe and our family. Okay, so then next, I'm just gonna burn through the rest of this real quick, if that's okay. So then we get to El Hagadol Hagibor Vahanara, El Elyon, the God, the great, the powerful, the awesome, the most high. Where does this come from?
Wizard
Wizard of Oz.
No, it is Exodus, Shemot, chapter 3. Yet it was to your ancestors that God was drawn out of love for them, so that you, their lineal descendants, were chosen from among all from all peoples, as is now the case. Cut away therefore the thickening. Actually, sorry, this is not Exodus, this is Deuteronomy. This is one of Moses' final discourses. Moses is talking to the people, saying, cut away therefore the thickening about your hearts, or in other words, circumcise the foreskin of your hearts, and stiffen your necks no more. For your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the powerful, the awesome, the most high, who shows no favor and takes no bribe. Okay, so Abudraham, why invoke this origin when saying this prayer? Why should we hyperlink to this moment where Moses is telling the people, reminding them that God is great, powerful, awesome, and takes no bribe? What if it's that you can't bribe God with your lineage? Right? We just talked about, look, remember, this is what David was saying, remember who my ancestors were, right? I might not have enough merit, but remember the merit of my ancestors. Immediately we get another verse saying, hey, remember that God doesn't take bribes. It's not, you can't just rely on your ancestors, your individual behavior matters too.
So all the more that it's about reminding ourselves
Right.
who our ancestors are, what their example was, as opposed to using it as a bribe.
Prayer should remind you of your own values as well, right? There's also, you can look into it, this is, a lot of what I'm teaching, I have to credit Rabbi Joel Levy from the conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem, who taught me this, a whole class on Abudraham and prayer. So I want to give credit where credit's due. He really is behind this teaching. But he says, if you look at Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, these are referring to 3 realms. The upper realm is the angels, the middle realm is the planets and the stars, the lower realm is our world, and God is El Elyon. God rules all 3 realms, which is, I think, an Aristotelian way of looking at it, the 3 realms. But then we say El Elyon, that God rules all of it. And I want to end with one more, I think, revolutionary component of the Avot blessing. And also just draw attention to the fact that this has been an hour on one paragraph of the Amidah. And that's why, I mean, it should
So Jewish.
revolutionize the way that we pray, because what if you're actually tapping in and clicking on these hyperlinks as you're praying, but it requires praying a lot slower, right? So maybe we do pray too fast because you can't go all these places in your mind if you're just blasting through. So that's how those rabbis maybe could go from Shachri to Mincha, because if you're actually taking time to say this verse, and this verse goes to this place in the Torah, and that's supposed to make me feel this way, and I need to tap into that feeling before I say this line. Now it's an all-day affair, right? Okay, so
That would be a lifetime
lastly, El Elyon, where does El Elyon come from? This is our final text. And King Melchizedek of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was meeting Abraham after the War of the Kings, where Abraham goes to war with these kings to get Lot back, because Lot was kidnapped by these kings. And King Melchizedek at the end comes and greets him with bread and wine. He was a priest of El Elyon, of God Most High. So he's not Jewish, and yet he's a priest of El Elyon. It kind of makes me think of Bilam, the prophet, who is not Jewish and yet has this relationship with God. Okay, so he blessed Abraham, saying, "Blessed be Avram of God Most High, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, El Elyon, who has delivered your foes into your hand." And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Sort of maybe an origin of the maser, of the tithe offering in the temple. Maybe it gets its origins from here. It's an interesting thing. But what I want to focus on is the fact that we have a non-Jewish king who refers to God as El Elyon. And in our prayer, Avot, our ancestral prayer, which is talking about us as a tribe, as a unique tribe with a unique relationship with God, we use language from a non-Jew. So it sort of goes to this balance of our tribalism, but also our globalism and diversity and tolerance, to say that while we're going to put our own Jewish unique spin and meaning on these words actually came from somebody who's not Jewish, and we're putting them in this prayer, a prayer that diverts from the normal formula of a prayer and is strictly about how we are a unique nation with a unique lineage. And we're going to use the way that a non-Jew referred to God, El Elyon. So we're prepared to borrow language and imbue it with our own meaning when describing God, who is a God who unites us all. Right? That El Elyon, God rules all the realms, Jews and non-Jews alike. Go ahead.
Is this the only place in Torah where El Elyon is used?
It's the
I know it's
first.
all over the prayers, especially.
Yeah,
in
then we
high
use
holidays.
it, and I think it's also in some songs. So I think
I
it's,
did say Torah.
but I believe this is the first.
I said
Yeah.
Torah.
But so I want
So
to, I know
we're allowed to use non-Jews words, but we can't drink their wine.
if they touch it, no good. But because it might have been idol worship, you don't know. So I just want to end on this point, and I want to thank everybody for staying 5 minutes late and apologize for dipping into that time. But just to go back to the beginning, Ramban says your personal distress should be what causes you to pray. You don't need to pray every day. It should come from a place of distress. But Abu Draham says something a little bit different, which is don't wait for the feeling to come. And this is sort of getting us back to the case for davening 3 times a day, you know, in fixed times. Because he says, even if you're not feeling it, let the text inspire the feelings that you're meant to feel by knowing where these words come from and what feelings that they're meant to invoke. So there's a pathos and a connection from the text. So first comes text, then comes emotion, then comes prayer. So he agrees that prayers must come from emotion, but he's adding this kiddush, this new idea but the emotion should arise from our understanding of the text and where it comes from and what it's meant to inspire in us as we pray. So that's just one paragraph of the Amidah. But I hope it helps us approach prayer with a new appreciation for where these words are coming from and how we can have an emotional prayer experience.
And God on High is a song in Les Mis, and it's the Father's prayer to God. Yes.
So it's Wizard of Oz and Les Mis. These are the modern. Karen, did you want to say?
Well, I don't know. Kind of personal. We talk about meaning of prayer and everything. And I find it difficult to find that much meaning in prayer because I don't know Hebrew.
Yeah.
And so we say these, and I know coming most days, I know all the songs and I can sing them. And then if Cantor changes the tune, sometimes I have a little trouble, but then I finally get it and everything. But it has no real meaning except for that I love to sing. And so I would love to see more English in our services because then I would know what I am doing.
Yeah.
But you might not like it as much.
You might not like what you're saying.
What you have to do is get the idea of this is what I teach the kids, get the idea of the prayer and you can get it, believe it or not. I think they said there are like 240 words that you need to know. to understand the prayer book.
When we do the Amida, I read it in English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now, can I say
There's another way
something?
Go ahead, Helena, yeah.
Can I say something about it? I understand you, okay? I came from a background of Hebrew, okay? To me, when it is a meaningful prayer and everybody reads it in English, I read it in Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
So you can read it in English, whatever speaks to your heart. I think that that's the kavanah,
Yeah.
that whatever speaks to you.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say is,
Well, the rabbis do
I-
say, I thought you were done, sorry.
about the Avinu, okay? So Adonai. Me, the meaningful, my father was always working, whenever he could find work in Israel. It was very hard times to bring food on the table. So whoever gave me the notion of God and the tefillot and everything was actually my mother, who was came from a very religious background, and she was the one who taught me calmly and nicely what is good, what is bad, and stuff like this. So to me, when they say Avotenu, I always add the Imotenu.
Yeah.
Because to me it's more meaningful.
Right.
It's not that my father gave me a lot of other things,
Right.
but to me, personally.
Yeah.
So I think that each one of us, that's why we are also individual and not other. You know what other means?
A herd.
A herd, thank you. So we have to have our own opinion also.
Right.
Not only, and that's why I hate politics in any synagogue. It shouldn't be political.
And when we let people do the Amidah, it might feel like, oh, it's a cookie cutter, they just keep saying it. But when I say, or like the words on the page are the thoughts of your heart,
Yeah.
because for moments like that, where you shouldn't feel beholden to the words on the page, that's the only thing
So
you
I
can say.
say,
It's supposed to help you, help you to access.
I think a lot of my friends, the Israeli friends, they don't come to synagogue and they don't belong to synagogue, okay? In Israel, you didn't have to belong to a synagogue and pay dues in order to come and pray.
Mhm.
So we came from a different kind
don't have-
of
Culture.
notion or culture, okay? And if you wanted to have your place in the synagogue for the high holidays, you pay to have your seat in the synagogue for the high holidays.
Mhm.
But you didn't have to belong and to pay dues
Right.
in order to come to, so to me it was very foreign. I couldn't go and pray for Yom Kippur because I didn't belong to synagogue when I came here. I couldn't afford it, okay? So there are all kind of things that put people away from synagogues.
Yeah.
The other thing is about the speed also. I'm sorry I'm taking so much time. I read fairly fast in Hebrew, okay? And a lot of people, they just skip. They read the first line and blah, 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 and they read the last one, and they don't really read all the middle. And I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
But they are
Yeah.
in a hurry to eat, so I'm not saying anything. I'm reading my stuff and.
And by the way, logically, if you do the Paticha and the Chatima, if you do the opening and the
It's
closing,
okay.
it's okay. So, but I think that actually, right, if you're doing it so that you can get to eat faster, maybe that's not so good. But if you do it because you then want to improvise and have your own meditations in the middle, Harei Zeh Meshubach, like I think that's praiseworthy. I think that's maybe even better, right?
So that's where it got.
But I wanted to give Aronowitz one more opportunity if you wanted to introduce yourself. No pressure, but welcome again and glad that Rafi referred you to the class.
Unmute and show your face.
I know, I just don't want to put him on the spot.
Did at the beginning.
Oh, did you? Oh, you did. You said.
A little
bit. All right. Well, glad you were here and thanks Rafi for referring him. And I'm so glad to be back. Thank you, everybody.